Hello, and my name is Mikei the Mighty, and welcome to Mikei Talk. It's been a while since we last did a podcast. A lot of the people that have been on it in the past and are hoping to be on in the future have been a bit busy recently, so welcome back. And today I am with a guildie of mine, and this is Arctic, who you've heard before, so welcome Arctic.
Hey, thank you, Mikey.
And so today we're going to be covering a few different topics. And we're going to start off by talking about a lot of speculation about a potential summer patch. Now, we know that ArenaNet are planning to do quarterly patches. We are expecting a summer patch sometime soon. And people are believing that the Living World Season 3 is expected to be one of them. Now, ArenaNet have given us no hints about what's coming out. Are we going to get a Living World Season 3 in July? Is it going to be August? We don't know. There's the way that ArenaNet are giving out information tends to be a bit more of a surprise at the moment. So, Arctic, what are your thoughts? Do you think that, one, we are going to get we're going to talk about the summer patch a little bit later, but do you think we're going to be getting Living World firstly next week? If not, when?
Personally, from what I've seen with ArenaNet, I don't think they're going to be giving us Living Story Season 3 next week. And the only reason that I don't think we're going to be getting that next week is due to the fact that they do usually tease everything. That includes raids, that includes Living World Season 2, they teased it. Heart of Thorns, they teased it when it started coming out, so since we have no teasers, I don't have a feeling like we're going to be getting Living Story Season 3 next week, if at all, if we are getting the summer patch. But for right now, I don't think we're going to be getting Living Story Season 3 next week.
Okay, so, alright, if we don't get Living World Season 3 next week, what about there's been a lot of these new events, the current events going on. What do you think that's going to lead to direction-wise for Living World Season 3? You know, if you're a player that, okay, you're listening to this podcast and you've not really been into Guild Wars 2 recently, do you think that this is something that you're going to be able to jump in and be like, okay, I've played Heart of Thorns, I completed Heart of Thorns, I haven't played since, like, January, am I going to be needing to know what's going on, or can I just jump straight in?
That's actually a really good question. I think you would have to do some of the the current events in order for you to understand what would be happening, but I also believe that you could, if you didn't do any of the current events, just jump straight into it, because ArenaNet does like to have some, not rehashing, but go back over what did happen. So I think that they would have a little bit of a quest, not a quest, because we don't do quests, but it would be something more in the lines of them following a way to let us know exactly what happened from when we ended Heart of Thorns until this point now, starting Living Story Season 3.
Yeah, and let's talk about, obviously, Living World Season 3 as an entity. Now, we had Living World Season 1, which was very experimental. You know, you've not been able to replay it, apart from some of the boss encounters that you can replay in Fractals, but you can't replay it as you can Living World Season 2. Now, Living World Season 2 was a very polished season. It was much better planned, well thought out, much more fluid, and we also got those details. We got the details. We got the updates every 2 weeks roughly. They had a couple of breaks here and there. What do you think we're likely to get in terms of content for Season 3? Do you think it's going to be similar to Season 2? Do you think that they are going to push the boundaries a little bit more? Do you think we're going to get it every 2 weeks? Or what are your impressions for Living World Season 3 based on what some of the rumblings coming out of ArenaNet?
That's really interesting, because ArenaNet has been recently saying that they really do want to cater to the people and they want to make sure that everyone's happy. And maybe it's just me, but everywhere that I look, it seems like a lot of people really do want Living World Season 1 events coming back, such as the Twisted Marionette, Battle for Lion Arch, etc. So,
and fixing signposts?
Yes. So
Come on, man.
yeah,
Fixing
remember that?
signposts.
That was a fun mission. But it's I think that they may do somewhat of a mix of Living World Season 1 and 2, because Season 2 was great for the replayability value. I absolutely love that,
I would
especially
agree.
helping with our guildies. Like, we have a lot of guildies that didn't do the story, and so I was able to go back and help them, and we were able to enter the instances together, and it worked out so nice rather than Living Story Season 1, where you did the instance and then that was it. If you didn't do it, you missed out on your chance to do it, which I thought was a
Yeah.
little bit rough, since it's always nice to be able to go back and see what you've done instead of
Mm.
having it hidden away forever.
I'd also say as well, as someone who did all the achievements when they came out, I haven't actually gone back and I haven't played the season 2 since it was out. Most of it I achieved during the 2 weeks that it was out. And, it'd be nice to actually revisit them. Now, a lot of my other alternate characters haven't done all the achievements, and it'd be interesting to actually go back and look at the season 2 and see whether or not it would actually be, see how it plays off again. But the good thing is, for those people that, if you're coming into the game, fresh, you never bought Heart of Thorns, you can actually buy Living World Season 2 and experience that, then play Heart of Thorns, and you can get a good appreciation for the story. What about the expectation for when the release of each particular moment for the Living World Season 3? Last time they had 8 particular stories, sort of 8 particular, releases. What about Season 3? Season 2 had 8 releases. Some of them were 2 weeks, so then there was a gap, and then they had another few releases. Are we expecting a 2-week release schedule, or do we expect something a little bit longer?
I would love 2 weeks. That would be awesome. Every 2 weeks to release a new part of the Living World Season 3. That would be great. I would be very happy with that. However, I don't know if that's a good thing to say yet, just because I don't want my expectations to be crushed if it doesn't happen. But it would definitely be nice to have 2 weeks again like we did in Season 2. It was really nice just to have every 2 weeks. That was one of the times that I had the most amount of my friends on my friend list being active,
Yeah.
and in the guild
Yeah.
as well. Everyone was just on. It was amazing. People were all over. And then after all the story ends, then my whole friends list goes dead and the whole guild goes dead.
But
except for the regulars.
I would also say as well, not only did you have every 2 weeks you had a release, every alternate week when they didn't do a release, you had a teaser trailer.
Exactly.
And so every week you were getting some type of thing going on in the game. What I will say is I don't believe it will be a 2-week release schedule. For the simple reason, it was very difficult. The ArenaNet were under the impression that they didn't give enough polished content in their view, which I disagree with. I think that their content for season 2 was brilliant. Look at things like when you became Cade, for example, and you're able to become a thief and actually experience that point of view. Or, getting all the force, sort of getting all the allies, the Char, the humans together at, the Grove, and then try and get them to join together. That was an interesting story. I don't think it's going to go the same 2-week release schedule. I believe we're going to have, again, I think we'll probably have 8 episodes. And I think we'll do it in a monthly basis. It will come out every month. I think there'll be a bit of a hype up to the month. And the reason for that is I think it will tie nicely into their schedule, whereby after 8 months, or 9 months, for example, then you'd expect them to do the big push for the next expansion. And for those people who are actually aware of the dates, it's been roughly 9 months since Heart of Thorns launched. If we get Living World Season 3 next week, for example, another 9 months goes by, and that would lead us to an 18-month break, 18 months after the Heart of Thorns launch, which would be a very good timescale to bring out the next expansion, or at least have the next expansion on the way. So I can see it being done that way. Obviously, Arctic, you may disagree with that. What do you think on that? On some of the thoughts I put forward.
I'm just trying to not get my expectations crushed. That's all I'm hoping to do. I would love it though if what you said comes true. Once a month. I mean, I'd be fine with that because I would love just having more content, and even if it's spaced apart, that's still good for the reason that we can have more time to do stuff. I don't have to rush and get it done. Although secretly I love to actually rush and get it done because I just want to know all the story immediately. But it would be nice just to space things out. So if they do it bi-monthly, I'm completely fine with that. If they do it bi-weekly, I'm also fine with that. However, I do understand that doing it bi-weekly means that they've had to either have all the instances and everything completely ready, completely polished, or that they need to spend more time, in which that would do it on a monthly basis. Which, again, I'm still fine with, since we haven't had any new updates in a long time. I'm completely fine if it's just once a month.
I mean, you can tell how keen the community is to get new content by these current events that are going on, because whenever something releases on patch day, everybody's like do you remember when we had the last patch day 2 weeks ago, and everybody was in Gendaron Fields? There was a huge zerg of around 150 people. Now, I don't know what the map cap is, but it seemed like the entire population of Gendaron Fields was fighting on this one point, and I'd never experienced lag like this since the Southern event with the Karka back in 2012. That's how bad, how much people were desperate for this type of content. It'd be interesting to see. I think what were your overall impressions though when you look back on season 2 when you compare them with Heart of Thorns? Now, Heart of Thorns was an expansion; it should have been a bigger story, but a lot of people compare Heart of Thorns to a Living World. A Living World season, because they felt that the content wasn't there. What were your opinion on that?
See, I liked the content we got from Heart of Thorns. I really honestly did, so I'm impartial. I did like Heart of Thorns. I thought it was really well made. I thought all the story was good. I had so much fun doing all the missions. Me and you did all the missions together. We went through it all together, and it was just so much fun, just hanging out, doing all the missions.
But what about, compare it to, if you look at the content that you got from season 2, because it wasn't just for example, there were 8 episodes, but there were multiple things that you had to do in an episode. It was kind of like that for the Heart of Thorns. You'd have 16 different story steps, but again, those story steps really didn't have too much involved in them, and it could be argued that that was an equivalent to a Living World in terms of content and things that you could do in there. Would you disagree? Would you say that Heart of Thorns had more story than, say, Living World Season 2?
No, I couldn't say that. With a whole heart, I couldn't say that it was not almost the same as the Living World season. It really was. It was pretty much like Living Story. It would be if you could say Heart of Thorns was Living Story Season 3, but I feel like that's just a little unfair because it was an expansion. It really was nicely made. I do think people give it less credit than it actually deserves. We got all these specializations. We got all these different events. We have 4 new maps. Yeah,
but in terms of story, because if you compare, all right, we can go and talk about this. We've talked about it many times on some of these podcasts. We talk about the story and how. We look at Guild Wars 1, Prophecies, an immense story. Factions, an immense story. Nightfall had an immense story. Eye of the North had a decent story. The Heart of Thorns really felt limited. It was just supposed to be the expansion. We felt, or we got the impression that it was supposed to be an equivalent-sized improvement to the game as what Guild Wars 2 Guild Wars 2 on launch was, and it was nowhere near it, and that was a big disappointment considering it was the same price. Where I'm looking now is that Heart of Thorns, alright, okay, this is something that I'd like everyone to be aware of. Heart of Thorns was obviously an interesting story, but limited in scope. To play Season 3, you will need Heart of Thorns, whereas Season 1 and Season 2, you just need to log in. So Season 3, you do need to own Heart of Thorns. If you don't have Heart of Thorns, you cannot play the Season 3. So it'd be interesting to say, well, look, Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns, you actually got the purchase for, you got included with Heart of Thorns Season 3 of Living World. Does that, for you, make it a little bit better in terms of how much you've actually spent and say, okay, maybe Heart of Thorns, the expansion storyline wasn't fantastically long, but we also got included with that Living World Season 3?
Yeah. So that's actually a good way to put it. The way when you say it like that, I think that makes a lot more sense. Saying it that way, that when you buy Heart of Thorns, you're also getting Living Story Season 3. However, I do think that, unfortunately, I know we have to have Heart of Thorns, but it would be nice if people that didn't want Heart of Thorns could play Living Story Season 3. However, I completely understand, because Season 3 is a continuation of the story, and Heart of Thorns is a big part of the story. So
indeed. Well, we've talked about Living Worlds Season 3 a fair amount. Let's move on and talk about the summer quarterly patch. Now, we're going to start talking about, they do a lot of balance changes. Have you got any expectations? I mean, do you think there's anything right now that's a little bit overpowered, underpowered, that you feel could experience some sort of balance change in the next patch?
Unfortunately, the only thing that I think may get the nerf hammer would be a Viper Necro. The only reason I say that is since, well, number one, of course, I just made my Viper Necro, so of course that happens. You know, that's going to be when it gets patched out. But the fact that the Viper Necro is such a really great part of raids and T4 fractals. I've been doing T4 fractals for quite a bit, and it's a little bit of a stomp just having 4 Necros or 5 Necros. It's really honestly so awesomely easy too, just to do your Necros, and you don't have to worry about like half of the mechanics. It really makes it a lot easier, and to the point where you wonder, is this too easy? Is this just making the game way too easy to the point where, yeah, you're going to have to nerf it because it's unintended?
For those of you people who are unaware about this, particular Viper Necro, could you explain what is it about this Viper Necro that makes it overpowered? Is there any particular skills or utility skills, traits that they're running? Or what is it that makes it so powerful?
What makes them so powerful is, first of all, the amount of conditions that you get to pump out. You get to pump out a huge amount of conditions, and if any conditions fall upon you, you get to throw them immediately onto your enemies. So your condition damage is insanely high. Your damage is very good, especially when you have a whole lot of little minions following you. That really makes it a big difference of damage. And also that you have a very large health pool to begin with as a Necro, plus adding on your Reaper's Shroud. And at that point, then you just have a lot of health, you have a lot of survivability, you have different traits, such in Death Magic, like Flesh of the Master and Corruptor's Defense, and those give you a lot of toughness to let you live longer. It's very strong. It's just a very strong class to play right now, and a build.
I would also agree, and I would also say in PvP, the Necro, it can be pretty damn strong. A thief versus a Necro, generally, if there's a competent Necro, will usually beat out a thief, because, or a Dragon Hunter, because there are certain classes that just don't have the ability to clear conditions. and the Necro has the ability to do that. So maybe they will nerf how quickly you can put conditions on an opponent. What about another profession? Let's talk about, let's go from light, medium to heavy. So let's talk about the other light class. Let's talk about Elementalist. What do you think about Elementalist? Do you think there's anything that's overpowered? Do you think there's anything that they may change and tweak? What do you feel about the Elementalist?
You know, I think, of course, they're going to come up with something that's going to tweak it. But for right now, I do think that the Elementalist is in a pretty solid spot. I don't think it's anything insanely crazy or far-fetched. I think it's in a good spot right now. But we can see how it turns out, of course. I think, though, for mainly what I use the Elementalist for, raiding and dungeons and fractaling, I think they're in a pretty solid spot.
I would also, yeah, I would also have to agree. I love, Elementalist is my main character, and I think they do a lot of damage. I don't think that their damage is maximized, but I think it's in a very good spot. I don't see the need to nerf Elementalist. You could argue perhaps in PvP they're slightly bunkerish, but generally, again, I think Elementalists are still able to be taken down, and I don't think Elementalists need to be changed too much. Let's talk about Mesmer. Mesmer, I really have very little to comment on. You may have something more. I think that they got a lot of nerfs to do with their wells. I think the alacrity and the quickness that they give in raids, fractals, PvE is tremendous. But I don't think they're too overpowered in PvP. I think in PvP they can do a lot of condition damage, so they may nerf how much damage confusion does. Because I don't know if you're familiar, Arctic, but in PvP, there are certain builds that can bring up to 21 to 24 stacks of confusion on you pretty damn quickly.
Oh, wow. I did not know that, and that's also because I do not play PvP.
Yeah. So, but what about your experience as a Mesmer? Do you think that there's anything overpowered right now? I mean, you could argue again this continuum split mower play that you might see in PvP. But then again, that's the whole point of continuum split, so you can activate a second skill. I mean, do you think in anything in PvE there's a little bit overpowered?
I actually don't think that the Mesmers are too overpowered. I think their main point right now is to be able to do a lot of boon sharing for your allies on your team, which is very nice. I will say that I don't think it's too overpowered since they did that alacrity nerf. I think that actually did put it in a pretty solidly decent spot. I don't think it needs any more nerfs. And to be quite frank, I don't think it needs any buffs either. I think it's in a solid spot. Mesmers are definitely needed for group content such as raids. There's nothing that you can say that you're going to be like, oh, we don't need Mesmers. No, there's definitely a need for them. But I don't think it's a need where it's like, hey, let's grab two. Usually that's not needed, especially for raids. But I don't think that it's needed for any other positions or reasons. So I don't think it's entirely needed, a nerf or a buff. I think it's in a pretty solid spot for right now. I could be wrong because I'm not entirely a game balancer, so not 100% sure here, but I do think it's in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and let's talk about as well the situation with conditions. We're going to come on to a little bit later. Let's talk about the Druid. Druid primarily was, or we talk about the Ranger. The Druid generally is one of the most played builds in raids because it's very, very important. I don't know if I can see anything, if we look back what happened in the spring update, they did a massive nerf to search and rescue because it was very, very overpowered in PvP, because it was primarily used to keep players on point, keep players alive. Very, very useful in raids. They nerfed it, and so now very few Rangers will actually, or Druids will actually take search and rescue, in particular, in certain situations. But I do feel there's an opportunity to boost the condition damage that Rangers can do, particularly the short bow. I feel the short bow is pretty weak. I do feel generally as well. If you also remember when they made a boost to a buff to the longbow, I do feel that the old days of the Power Ranger, can we see a boost to the power, sort of the longbow again? I mean, what do you feel, Arctic? Do you feel Rangers need a bit of a buff in that sort of the more offense as opposed to defensive strategies?
That is that's also a good question. I'm not entirely too sure for the reason that I don't play Druid too much. I do, however, whenever I raid, I play it, but I don't. Usually, I camp double staff, mainly for healing. There will be times that I will use a sword and an axe, and that is for reflecting. But mainly, I camp two stabs. So I'm not entirely too sure if there should be a buff for longbow. I know that the longbow damage isn't the best right now, so I can't speak on this too much, just mainly because I don't play too much Druid to begin with. So I would be lying if I would say, oh yeah, they need this or they need this. But I could see a little bit of a buff to them for their damage, especially.
Yeah. Let's also
non-staff related. Excuse me, I should correct myself. Non-staff related. I will say the staff is definitely balanced. We shouldn't do any more damage because if we do more damage, then that'll be a nerf to healing or something else. So we don't need that. I would say the damage is good. Damage for anything else other than the staff, sure.
All right, let's move on and let's talk about the thief. Do you think the thief is likely to get any buffs? And I will start off by saying, look, in raids particularly, I enjoy playing thief. I play a staff thief, but it's kind of limited. That I have seen in PvP some Condi thieves, some pretty impressive DPS thieves. So it does have that flexibility and variation. What about yourself? What's been your experience of thieves? Do you feel that they need a bit of a buff, or are they a little bit too strong with staff? What do you think?
I personally think that they're in a pretty good spot as well. But however, I don't play PvP too much, so I don't know how strong those builds are. But for raids, whenever I do see a thief, they really do a good bit of damage. I can't lie.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that they're underpowered or they need a buff.
Yeah, perhaps I would say maybe some of their other lower class weapons, like maybe pistol, like the dual pistols, maybe the dagger, maybe those sort of combos need a bit of a buff. But generally in PvP, when you see a thief on an opposing team, you can smile because generally the thief all they'll do is decap a point, and if you have someone holding it like a necro, they're going to beat a thief. So in PvP, thieves have generally been a little bit weak on that front. Let's talk about a class that is very interesting right now, and this is the engineer. Now, the engineer is going through a bit of a difficult phase in terms of what is its place in Guild Wars 2 right now. It used to be the engineer was the best condition damage class in the game. However, recently, the engineer has sort of fallen out of favor. There's very little that the engineer is used for. Even in raids, it's very rare to see an engineer now because of the nerf they did to Slick Shoes, which was always very, very useful for removing the Defiance bar on enemies. Now Slick Shoes doesn't do as much damage to that Defiance bar. Engineers are sort of losing their place because you do have a lot of skill rotation to make a lot of condition damage. And engineers right now, even in PvP, they don't go for condition damage. They'll go for the scrapper route, which is a lot of sustain. Now, this is where I feel that the engineer is a little bit overpowered. I think the engineer with its hammer is overpowered, and keeping up those boons is too much. So I feel there's a nerf there. However, I do believe on a personal level that they need to boost the damage that grenade kits, that sort of bomb kits put out, that you can do with those sort of conditions. I don't know if if you've played too much Engie, but Engineer is my most played class in PvP. I've played almost 1,500 matches on that in ranked arena, but very few of that has been in the past 12 months. And that's because I used to play alright. I'll admit I played a turret NG, and I still do on my EU server because I like keeping it alive. But I also played a lot of condition damage where we were able to lob grenades, and it was a 900 range, which they nerfed. And I would like them to see them bring them back, that the grenades range is back to 900. I'd also like you to see, I like to see a boost in the damage done by conditions for the grenade kit. For me, that would be my opinion. I feel that they need to nerf how much sustain you get with the hammer, but let's make the engineer a better condition damage class and what it should be. What about you, Arctic? You know, I don't know how much engineer you've played, but what's your been experience of engineers? You know, do you see many engineers in raids or fractals?
I actually usually don't see engineers in raids. The only time I will see them is for Veil Guardian, and the reason I see them is due to the fact that they have great seeker control. But other than that, I usually don't see them too much, and I think one of the highest reasons I usually don't see NGs too much is the reason that the Viper Necro, condition-wise, is very good, like, and on par to what the old Kandi NG could do. However, now with the the introduction of everyone now using Epidemic on bosses for raids especially, but anything else like T4 fractals where groups of enemies are hoarded together, Epidemic is amazing at spreading conditions everywhere. And that is a great tool to be using to double and amplify all of your damage for raids. For example, with Gorseval or Veil Guardian, you use your conditions on a boss, and then one of the Necros will Epidemic and spread the conditions to the Spirits or one of the Seekers or something else, and then another Necro, other Necros, will Epidemic the other enemy, not the boss, and then the boss will get those conditions back again, which gives the boss an extra 25 stacks of whichever conditions went.
Yeah.
And that is a huge amplification to damage. It's insane. So when you have more Necros, you're actually going to get more damage than you would with a Kandi NG.
So that raises,
that's going back to the Kandi Druid doing a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you raise up, particularly regarding the engineer. Well, then let's move on. Let's talk about we're going to go to the heavy classes. Let's talk about Guardian. Guardian's interesting right now. I do see some occasionally in PvP. They'll be running their Trapper builds. Occasionally you may see a Burn Guardian. But they're in a interesting place. I don't know how much change you can do for the traps. I think the traps are okay. In PvE, Guardians are very useful, particularly in raids, because of the amount of protection with the hammer that they can do. And they still can do a lot of damage. Do you think that Guardian is in a good enough position that it doesn't need any buffs or nerfs? I mean, is there anything you feel is overpowered with the Guardian?
I feel like the Guardian could stand to get some buffs. I definitely don't think nerfs, because they're definitely not overpowered. However, I do think that they could get some more buffs in order for helping some damage issues. Longbow is taken sometimes. However, I usually don't see too many Dragon Hunters running Longbow. Only if it's like a world boss and they need a ranged weapon, then you see it. But otherwise, I usually don't see it, especially in raids. I don't see it in dungeons too much. Dungeons, I see Great Sword and Hammer. Sometimes I'll see Mace and Shield, but usually I see Hammer. So I think Hammer's in a good spot. However, I do think that other weapons for the Dragon Hunter could be buffed for the Guardian.
Yeah.
The traps, I think, are in a good spot too, though. like you said earlier, I think the traps are in a pretty decent spot. I don't think they need buffs or nerfs. However, damage from weapons could stand to get some buffs.
I think that's some very good points, and I would agree with you on that. And let's talk about the Revenant. Now, the Revenant previously was a pretty strong class. It's very, very useful in terms of raids. You always need at least one Revenant. In PvP, Revenant has been struggling recently, and one of the issues has been the ability to remove conditions. Now, the Revenant I played a lot of in PvP Season 2. I really enjoyed it. However, in Season 3, Revenants have been struggling because they are very susceptible to a lot of conditions that the Necro can bounce on you, and they can boon strip very easily. So the Revenant's been struggling a little. What's been your experience of Revenants, Arctic? I know you don't play too much Revenant and you don't play too much PvP, so you can't explain from that front. But what's been your experience of Revenants in Guild Wars 2 right now?
I do have some experience with Revenant, not as much as others do. However, the Condi cleansing is a problem unless you're in Malix. So when you're in Malix, that's usually when your Condi cleansing is the best.
But it's still not enough because the Necros have the ability to keep putting conditions on you, and there's only a certain amount that you can do. What I'd like to see for the Revenants is them buff the Ventari legend and allow you to cleanse better with the tablet, because nobody uses, very, very rarely do people use the Ventari champion at all. Would you agree with me on that?
Well, I was going to say, hold on 1 second. Let's just actually talk about that for a quick second. I actually think that Ventari should be reworked. I'm usually not like a person that says, oh yeah, scrap it completely and rework it. I usually like to be the person to say, okay, you could salvage it and just do this and this and this. However, Ventari, I never see Ventari being used. Ventari is always non-used. It's not the best one. I never see it unless somebody's doing an off-meta healing build. Other than that, I just don't see it. So
I will have to say, I'd also say the same for the dwarven stance as well. The Jalis. I don't see any. Who runs that? People, if you're a Revenant,
I don't.
If you are a Revenant, you will always run the Glint Elite Specialization because it's the best, and then you got a choice between Shiro and Malix, because Shiro's great for giving you that DPS. It's great for the Jade Wind Elite skill because that stuns people, and you may also go for the Malix because it gives you that little bit of resistance. But there's no point in running the Dwarven stance because of the hammers, which used to be a thing, but they nerfed the damage that the hammers do. And you're right about Ventari. It's, maybe occasionally I'll see it used for the reflex that it can put out, but I do feel that you're right. It definitely needs a massive rework. I think the Ventari tablet was a very creative idea, but I feel that the character has to spend a lot of time focusing on where the tablet is. And maybe they need to do it so that you, the character itself, are the tablet. Or you have the tablet on you, you're holding the tablet, and that you do the skills that way. So that you don't have to worry about moving the tablet around, you just keep it like that. That may be something they need to think about.
I think that's actually a really great idea. And I do want to reiterate exactly what you said. It is insanely creative. I thought it was a very, very, very creative idea for a different a different stance for your Revenant channel.
Yeah.
However, I do think it really does just need some sort of rework because, again, the only time I actually do see Ventari is actually in the Aether Path when you have to move those 2 tar elementals. And you just get the tablet to move around so it could reflect the projectiles of the other elementals trying to kill it. Other than that, I don't see Ventari used very often. It's very difficult. It can be clunky, and the other thing is that it's extremely expensive in terms of your energy to use. I would say if they did have to do some changes, having the 6 of being able to, your heal skill, being able to move, should be way less energy. Since it costs so much just to move it to begin with, and then using your other abilities and your weapon abilities costs energy as well. So you run out of energy insanely fast in Ventari. So I think it needs a rework. It's insanely creative. If you could do something else with the tablet and still have Ventari deal with it, I think that's a great choice. Just for right now, it's not working out the way that it should be.
And that's a really, interesting discussion that we can have on that. Let's move on to the final class, the final profession, and that is the warrior. Now, in terms of PvE, a warrior is very, very useful. Warrior can put out a lot of might for the rest of your party, for the rest of your raid. It's got very, very useful banners to help be a very supportive role while still doing that DPS. However, I would also say in PvP it is very, very strong right now, and that's saying it from someone who got to legendary in PvP by playing 111 matches. And I'd say about 95% of those were a warrior on this particular mace bow build, where the idea is the warriors can pump out a hell of a lot of resistance, and I do think the weapon swapping is a bit quicker. I can see some nerfs coming to, for example, how quick you weapon swap, for example, and potentially how fast you build up adrenaline. I don't know if you've experienced that, Arctic, but what are your views on the warrior?
See, I don't play PvP, so I don't see PvP like what you're saying as the weapon swapping. However, in PvE, I think they're pretty balanced. Only I'm saying in PvE terms. I don't see them as overpowered in PvE. I think they're in a pretty good spot, especially even for raids as a PS warrior for keeping up might. It's amazing. They're really good. But I wouldn't say they're nerf-worthy or buff-worthy either.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that we may see some changes come in determined on the PvP side of things. For me, I would say I'm a decent PvP player. I'm not a phenomenal player, but even I was amazed at this particular build, and I do believe that a build like this shouldn't allow a player like me to get to legendary in just over 100 games, because it makes legendary less meaningful. So that's something that should be looked at. So we looked at some of the nerfs, sort of the potential buffs to classes and professions for the summer patch. I'd like to discuss something that's been very, very vocal and a big part of the Guild Wars 2 community right now, and that's about raids. Now, raids were brought in. They were one of the big things about Heart of Thorns, because Guild Wars 2, one of the main issues with Guild Wars 2 was there was lack of endgame content. A big part of the community were getting bored because they didn't have anything challenging or meaningful to play. And then they brought raids in with Heart of Thorns. Not initially, they waited a few months and then they brought in the first wing, which was the Veil Guardian, Gorsible and Sabbather fights. Then they brought in the second phase, which was Salvation Pass, which was Slothazar, the trio, and Matthias. And then you obviously had the final raid wing, and that was the escort event. It was the keep construct, and then it was Zero. Now, a lot of people were saying some good things and bad things. Obviously, we'd have the fact that it was challenging content, which was great. Perhaps a little bit too challenging for some people. That's something we can talk about. But the thing that really has got a lot of people up in arms has been, one, the fact that the content has been so good that it's brought in new lore and new content that during this drought has got a lot of people pissed off because they can't play it. And then there's other things such as legendary armor and items that are limited to the raid wings, and that again is frustrating people because with Guild Wars 2, the core game, you were able to get most of the different items playing through various game methods. So, Arctic, I'd like to get your view on this. Arctic, for those of you who are not sure, or not aware, Arctic up until about, I'd say, a month ago, wasn't really heavily focused on raids until I suggested actually, you should have a look at it again. I think it was the new raid wing came out. And since then, Arctic raids much more than I do, and it's got he got the first kill of the keep construct, and oh no, I got the keep construct. You got the first zero kill
Yeah.
from our guild. And so Arctic's one of those people that has gone from being a non-raider. You started off a little bit with El Guardian in the first raid wing, didn't really do much for the second raid wing, and then suddenly for the raid wing 3, bam, he's back in it and he's started to really enjoy it. So I'd like to get your view on raids and discuss it from your point of view.
So I am exactly like you said. I never was into it until I finally just gave it another try. You were the one that actually told me, hey, just give it another try because it really is not as bad as I thought it was. And after I started doing it for a while, I really, really, really like it. I like the content. I like the challenge it poses. I like the rewards that it gives. I just really like raids now. It's so much fun for me. So I'm now the type of person that every week I have to make sure all the raid wing bosses are dead before the week ends, so that way I get all my rewards I could possibly get. I was never like that before. I never cared about it. If I got to do Veil Guardian one week and then that's it, sure, I'll do that. And then if I didn't get to do Gorseval, who cares? Didn't matter. I didn't really have too much emphasis or love into raiding. So now I did get into it and I like it. Now, the main problem that I hear people say about raids is that the difficulty is very high, to which I would respond, that is an opinion that I do not share specifically with myself, because I think that the raids are difficult, yet they are doable still. And I wouldn't like to see them lower down the difficulty of raids. Yes. However, I was originally a fan of having an easy mode of raids, and I know that sounds weird, but
I was going to say like an infantile mode that you get in. We had it with Super Adventure Box.
Exactly. Now it would be exactly like how Super Adventure Box is, where the rewards you're going to get are extremely diminished. And I completely agree. You shouldn't be getting great rewards if you're just doing an infantile mode. However, I do think that it would be nice, especially even for people that don't know the mechanics of the boss. So maybe give the boss just less damaging skills and less health, but keep all the same mechanics so that people who aren't into raids, that want to learn the mechanics first before going into a regular raiding group, they could learn the mechanics. I thought that was interesting, but definitely not lower the amount of difficulty that it is right now, because I think the difficulty is perfect and the mechanics are fun, they're challenging. I love the new mechanics in this raid wing of moving the orbs around and getting them into the little, I don't know what they're called, geysers?
Like rifts. Yeah, like rifts.
Rifts. So I like the content. I like how challenging it is. Another problem that I see a lot of people saying is that they don't like pugging and that they find it very hard to find a team each time. So for that, it's actually something that's affected me in real life. That's just a motto where I like to say, if you surround yourself with what you want, eventually you'll start seeing that more often and more often. So I was never a raider, and so I never seen raiding in my life. I barely see it at all. And then I started surrounding myself by raids. I started reading about it. I started watching videos. I started watching DNT guides. I started watching other guilds guides.
If you watch DNT, you ain't going to be very successful, are you?
But you know what I mean. I'm just watching the raid guilds. I'm watching the guides. And after I started doing that, I started seeing more raids. I started raiding more. And after I started doing that, then I started getting into it more. And I loved it. And now I see raids all over. I'm finding great friends that aren't raiding. I
Yeah.
find
All right.
myself finding more people that want to do it, that want to raid with me, that want to do more activities and the challenges of raids. So if you surround yourself with other people that, like mind, want to do raiding, you will find it an easier time to find a group.
So, all right, then let's talk about some of the negativity that raids have been getting. There are a large amount of people in the community that feel that raids don't belong in Guild Wars 2, that Guild Wars 2 is a casual game, and that they're upset that they can't play this game because at the end of the day, it's content that does require a lot of know-how, it does require a lot of effort and experience. But again, that's just the whole point of the raids, was that it's not designed for 90% of the player base. It's designed for that 10%. And, you know, when you think about Guild Wars 2, it has a lot of content targeted for specific people. There is PvP for those that want a PvP. There is the world versus world that want PvP on a massive scale. There are, in PvE, you could go around do the world bosses. You've got dungeons, you have fractals, you then have raids. And so, in my opinion, people that will say, "Oh, you know, having raids in Guild Wars 2 goes against the ethos." You know, the fact that players shouldn't be able to have there shouldn't be content that all the player base can't do. I completely disagree with. It's also the same where I feel that there is rewards that you get in raids that you can't get anywhere else in the game, and that's how it should be. It encourages people to play the game and play raids. Having content that's not available anywhere else in the game means that it's much more prestigious from doing that raid content. And I don't know how it is with you, Arctic, but you know, what have you experienced from people that say, well, I haven't been able to raid because I don't know the mechanics, I don't know the class that well, so I think that's unfair. You know, what would you say to that type of person?
To that type of person, I would say, again, just to immerse yourself into the raiding life. Just pick up some pugs in the raiding LFG and just keep doing it, and you will eventually get the mechanics. You will eventually learn what to do, watch YouTube videos, understand it. But to what you're saying before about people saying, you know, oh, they shouldn't be focusing so much on raids and they should, you know, be doing other things, I don't think that's correct at all. I don't think that's the right answer.
It's like, okay, you've got a dedicated team, 6 people that will make raids. Well, why can't you put those 6 people and make legendary weapons? I can go for a legendary weapon. I want a new short bow to go for. Why can't you give me another Chuka and Chambawat?
Yeah, and I mean, like, the way I think about it is like in a hospital. That would be like asking, oh, why can't the pharmacist give me my physical? Because that's not what the pharmacist is for, you know, a doctor's for that. The same thing with the rating team, you know, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to just take the rating team and put them on Living Story. They have no experience with Living Story. I mean, I don't know specifically, they may have experience with Living Story, but that's not what they're for. They're for rating, and so they will do rating. So it doesn't affect what's going to happen with Living Story or any other content.
Yeah, I mean, we've had things like the PvP and the fractal back pieces, legendary back pieces that you can't get from doing like PvE content. You know, going out in the world, like, all right, the fractal back piece technically is PvE content, but like the PvP back piece, you couldn't do unless, and you had to do over a number of PvP seasons. And do you think that's a good thing? And do you think, you know, we're seeing with legendary armor how you can only get that from doing raids? You can't get that from doing fractals. You can't get that from doing dungeons. Do you think that's how it should be? And what's your view on this type of reward?
So I have a little bit of mixed feelings for it, for the reason that I do have a lot of friends that have tried raids and that they seriously just don't like the way raids are. And that's fine. If you really gave raids your full effort to try to get into them and you really don't like them, that's fine. But I feel like if you did really want the legendary armor, having such a hard content to do is a little bit limiting. So let me just back up for a second. So if you wanted fractals and you wanted to do ad infinitum, to get ad infinitum, you start off the first collection with all the easy fractals. And then the next collection is starting the 25 to 50 fractals. And then the third collection is 50 to 75. And then the last collection is 75 to 100. It's a progressive thing so that even if you're not into fractals, but you do want to do it, you could start off slow and you can get into fractals. PvP, that's completely up to you if you wanted the PvP legendary back Ps. And you have to farm out, you have to expand your classes, you have to do Elementalist, you have to do Mesmer. Even if you don't like the classes, you still have to venture out and try them. The raiding, I understand where they're coming from, that they do want to have a legendary armor only from raiding. However, I do find it a little limiting for people that don't want to do raiding or such hard content, that they can't do it. Even if they wanted to try, because it's too difficult. I know some people say like they don't want to go too hardcore, that they can't press the buttons fast enough. I think somebody in our guild said that they have arthritis, and so pressing all the buttons is hard for them. And they like the casual content, but they like, maybe when Legendary Armor comes out, they love the look of it and they would like to get it. So I'm not entirely too sure. I'm mixed opinion. I like the fact that they are limiting it. However, limiting it upon something that's so hard that does divide the community is a little bit of a fickle situation.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your guys' thoughts on it. If you want to leave some comments, you can. There is one final thing I'd like to do before just wrapping this up, and that's talk about, we talked about the Necro being overpowered. I had a question sent to me by one of our guildies, Shadowcaster, and he was asking me about how condition damage right now and how conditions are pretty prevalent in Guild Wars 2 right now. There's a pretty big focus and a lot of damage can be done by conditions. Do you think that conditions are a little bit overpowered right now in the game? Do you feel that, there is the Holy Trinity, you have the DPS, the healer and the tank, and Guild Wars 2 tried to change that. And do you feel that the conditions are overpowered at all? You can look at the Necro bit in that case. What's your view on conditions right now in terms of how much damage it's actually outputting?
I think the damage is pretty substantially high. However, I haven't seen too much conditions builds other than Necro and NG. I haven't seen the Kandi Thief that you were talking about, so I can't speak too much on that. But for Kandi Necro, definitely overpowered. But see, for Kandi Reaper, for Kandi Reaper, if it's overpowered. For Kandi NG, I haven't actually seen that being as something that's overpowered.
Well, so, for Warrior it is, because the Mace Bow build that I was talking to you about, that's all about putting a lot of conditions on your foe and pumping out that resistance. So again, against, for example, the Revenant, if they're in PvP and they're taking on a Necro, it's very difficult because of the conditions that they can put out there that the Necro can do.
So, actually about that, we once talked about this a long time ago where I said, I think that what they may do eventually is, instead of nerfing the actual builds or anything like that, I think that they may somehow make it so that conditions are blocked by a certain amount of toughness. So that way, if you build toughness, you're also blocking, just instead of raw damage, you're also blocking conditions.
I'd like to see that. Yeah, I'd like to see
some amount.
Yeah, I'd like to see sort of, I don't know whether it be a new I don't know what you call it. What is the thing you call for power? I forgot what it's called. Yes, a new attribute where it's the equivalent that toughness negates damage on you. Maybe having a bit equivalent, or it's something new, or and put it on toughness, whereby the more toughness you have, the less damage you take. Now, I will say that one of the reasons they don't do this in PvP is because then it can lead to very, very long duels that will actually end and sort of be fairly boring. So the more damage, it's actually the better off from a spectator's point of view. However, you know, if we look at, say, in PvE, and we say look at some of the, let's take a raid boss, for example, or a world boss, let's take the Shatterer, maybe it has a huge amount of toughness, so conditions do very, very little damage to that. Do you feel that that would be a good thing then, or do you feel that, you know, this idea may be a bad thing? Conditions are, you know, what they're supposed to be doing, making these battles quicker and all about the damage.
Me personally, I do like the way conditions are run right now. I don't want what you were saying before of having like the Shatterer make conditions not available, for the reason that I like build diversity. I want to see Condi builds still around, and Condi builds are still needed even for raids. You still need Condi builds as well, because that really helps a lot. So I don't want Condi nerfed itself, but I would like to see some amount of condition damage to be blocked by either toughness or a new attribute. However, I also don't know, because again, I'm not a game designer, but I don't know how strong that would make tanks. Because then instead of now Condi builds being the best, now tank builds would be the best, and if you don't run something tanky, you know, you're unmeta. So I don't entirely know what the happy medium is, but I would like to see some Condi damage be blocked by a certain amount of toughness, so that Condi damage isn't useless, but it's not overpowered.
Yeah, I would agree on that point. Well, I think we've covered a lot today. You know, again, if those people listening and watching, if you have any comments, you know, if we want to talk about Living World Season 3, if you want to talk about the summer patch and what, you know, potential changes, is there anything that you want to see changed in terms of balance? Is there anything you want to see in terms of the Living World? You know, are you happy with the direction? How long do you want to see it? Do you want to see it like Arctic and be like every 2 weeks, or would you prefer it every month? You know, what's your opinion on that? And also, what about raids? You know, we've talked about raids a couple of times on this channel on Mikei Talk. You know, are you someone that really struggles with raids? You know, would an infantile mode be something that you'd be interested in? Even if it doesn't give you the dramatic rewards, maybe it actually helps you get into it and actually really teaches you about the mechanics and something like that. But a big thank you again to Arctic for being on the show. So thanks very much to Arctic.
Of course, glad to be on here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And again, anyone else, feel free to leave any comments in the description, any comments in the space below. Feel free to like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done already. And yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Raids, PvP, legendary weapons, how to make gold in Guild Wars 2, and Mikei Talk. Please use these links below to help support my channel, and I'll keep producing content you enjoy.